Same day as well, Utah's Mark Eaton set a reunion arena record with 12 blocked shots in his team's 103-96 victory at Dallas. He had 8 rebounds and 6 blocks in the fourth quarter alone. Staggering numbers.
6 block shots in one quarter.
In the fourth quarter. That's ridiculous. So obviously 7'4", 300 pounds, or the best part of. Great effort there from Mark Eaton.
That's NBA Live 95 numbers.
That's right, exactly. Every player's a superstar.
I always like to say that Michael got to play with me for a year at North Carolina. I think it really helped him.
Spectacular player from the beginning.
You can see right away Jordan was going to be a big-time scorer.
And showed what an impact he was going to have on the league.
This is NB85, celebrating the 30-year anniversary of Michael Jordan's rookie season in the NBA. And now, your hosts, Adam Ryan and Aaron Steen.
Welcome back to another episode of NB85. Aaron, we're up to episode 23 of the series, mate. Thanks for being part of the show as always. How are you today, mate?
Every day that I realise as a 25-year Bulls fan that I am learning new information about this 85 Chicago Bulls team and rookie Michael Jordan, mate, it's a great day. Get ready to enjoy probably our finest episode to date.
We don't want to talk it up too much, however, I think it is going to be an absolute pearler. So let's kick it off, mate, straight away. We're covering another 15-day block of the NBA's 39th season.
NBA News, Notes and Quotes, February 23rd through March 9th, 1985.
Well, the bad news from the previous loss against the Boston Celtics in Hartford, which we spoke about in the previous 15-day block of games, was that it was the Bulls' 4th straight loss. The good news, however, was that Michael Jordan may have emerged from a 3-game slump, wrote Bob Sakamoto of the Chicago Tribune on February the 23rd. Jordan resembled his sensational self with 15 points in the fourth quarter to make the Celtics sweat out the game in Hartford.
It was good to see a return to form, and on February the 23rd, the Bulls took on the Golden State Warriors at Chicago, and they had a good win, 140-125, in front of 11,475 fans. That brought their record up to 26 wins and 29 losses. And the Warriors were the league's cellar dwellers. They had dropped to 13-44 with the loss. The victory snapped Chicago's 4-game losing skid as well. And for the Bulls, Jordan had an absolute sensational game. 38 points, 5 rebounds and 5 assists. Orlando Woolridge had 26 points. Dave Corzine and Quentin Daly had 19 points apiece. David Greenwood had 13 points and 10 rebounds. And Jawan Oldham, a name that you'll hear a little bit throughout this episode, had 12 points and 3 blocks. And we'll mention Enos Watley in just a moment, / Ennis Watley, depending on which side of the country you're born on. But we'll get to him shortly. For the Warriors, Eric Sleepy Floyd had 25 points, Purvis Short, 23, and Larry Smith, 13 points and 9 rebounds. You're going to touch on this article in just a minute, mate. The next day, an article appeared in the Chicago Tribune titled, "Goats Help Bulls Win." And it's an article that was littered with quotes that were equal parts somber and uplifting, and the best line of all may have come from the author himself, Bob Sakamoto, who wrote, "Watley was dishing and the Bulls were swishing." Ennis had 1 point, however, 21 assists. What a great effort that was.
That's a Dennis Rodman-esque stat line from the mid-90s when Dennis would peel off a 2 points, 24 rebound type of game.
No doubt.
In this article, it wrote that the Bulls hit 17 of 19 shots in the third term of this game to extend a 3-point lead at the half to 104-88 after 3 quarters. The Bulls were led by Watley's 21 assists and 13 and 10 from David Greenwood. The GOATs in the title referred to the 2 players having fallen out of favour with the Bulls coaching staff this season in Greenwood and Watley after having productive years in the 84 season. Watley was told he'd play a lot in this game with Quentin Daly out with a knee issue, and he delivered, falling just 1 assist shy of his career high that he set the season before.
And also, David Greenwood, I had a really good fact. I've completely forgotten what it was. Oh, no, yeah, I've got it now. David Greenwood was 9th in the NBA in 1984 in rebounds. So he had a fantastic year the season prior, yet was really flirting with good form and then pretty ordinary form throughout a majority of the 85 season up to this point. So good to see them both getting their dues.
I think David Greenwood really got off on the wrong foot in this season with that holdout at the start of the season that really didn't help him, I think, with his momentum going into the 85 season for the Bulls. And form and issues led to himself and guys like a Steve Johnson or a Sidney Green playing musical chairs as the other starting power forward for this Bull squad all season. So they were never really that settled, wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. And also David Greenwood and Sidney Green got into a fracas of sorts earlier in the season, which we talked about during a practice session that went a bit awry as well. So plenty of controversy surrounding these Bulls on and off the court, but makes for a fascinating listen to anybody who's sort of learning this firsthand through this series some 30 years later, which is just one of the great things about it, even if I do say so myself.
Which is what I mentioned earlier about having followed the Bulls for so long and learning so much new information about them. It's absolutely brilliant doing the research for each episode.
Yep. Now, on February the 24th, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bernard King each went for 39 points in the Lakers' 119-115 win at New York. Kareem scored a lazy 29 points in the second half alone, so good stuff there from the NBA's oldest player. Also, Clyde Drexler of Portland had a then-career and season-high 37 points in his team's 137-121 rout at San Antonio, and he was one assist shy of a triple-double. A fantastic game there from the Glide. And Larry Legend dropped 45 points at Indiana in Boston's 113-100 win. So a pretty good day's results there across the board. And just one other thing, mate, tenuously related, however, I will mention it, on this day as well, Bob Knight, who was the 1984 USA Olympic coach, he was thrown from the game, appropriately, for throwing a chair across the court in his team's, the Indiana Hoosiers, 72-63 loss to the even more appropriately named Boilermakers of Purdue. So that's well made to let off steam. I basically wanted to just say that for the fact that there was about 7 puns in a row.
It made sense. On February 26, the Odds and Ends wrote that Orlando Woolridge resided in announcer Bob Wolf's all-speaking team, which I guess was his version of the all-interview team.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. I also saw that little side bit in the paper as well. I'm glad that you brought it up, and that's what I first thought of as well as soon as it was mentioned. Speaking of the all-speaking team, something that you uncovered, mate, whilst you were in Chicago a few weeks back as we recorded this, you were talking with Mark Silverman of Waddle and Sylvie, and in a future episode of this series, mate, we will definitely include audio of your conversation where he mentions Orlando Woolridge and perhaps why he must have been part of this all-interview team.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to speak with Sylvie, who's a Chicago guy and grew up in the 80s, going to the stadium and saw a number of games in this 85 season. So I thought he was a pretty good subject to interview. So we'll have that in a later episode.
It was great too, I must say, just to build the anticipation, mate. It was a really good conversation. So that will be inserted into one of our future episodes.
Also in that day's paper, it spoke of Ennis Whiteley and David Greenwood, who both played so well in the win over Golden State, being listed as starters for that night's game against Cleveland.
And speaking of that night's game, mate, Cleveland at Chicago, 26th of February. The Bulls lost in overtime, 123-118 at Chicago Stadium in front of a lowly 6,965 people. Sadly, that's not the lowest attendance in this period of time. The Bulls dropped to 26-30 on the season, and the Cavs were now 19-18 after having started the season an absolutely dreadful 2-19.
And in some of the articles that I've read during this period where the Bulls were really slumping, the Cavs were even one of those teams that were mentioned about being one of the teams that were maybe going to challenge the Bulls for their playoff spot after a 2-19 start. So that shows you how well the Cavs had gone and how poorly the Bulls were playing at this stage of the season.
Yeah, they had a really rough trot, no pun intended, the Bulls. For Chicago, MJ had 28 points, 9 rebounds and 5 assists. Orlando Woolridge had 27 points. Quentin Daly dropped 20. And David Greenwood had a great game, 17 points and 16 rebounds in 43 minutes. So talk about answering the bell. Hello to Hubie Brown if you're listening.
And it was more towards the end of the season where a few of those issues that I mentioned before about the musical chairs with the starting power forward spot, that a few of these wrinkles were being ironed out, and you saw guys who were more settled in their their position like a David Greenwood starting and a Steve Johnson coming off the bench, both of who were settling into that role. And you can see in some of the results from the games, like Greenwood 17 and 16 in this game, that guys were actually starting to perform quite well.
Spot on analysis, Aaron. I like it. Now for Cleveland, Roy Hinson had 25 points. World B Free had 24 points and also hit three threes. And John Bagley had 18 points and 13 assists. And Phil Hubbard dropped 17 points and 11 rebounds.
Old Mother Hubbard.
Yeah,
He's back.
He's back.
He's back.
And the cupboard was not bare because he put up a good performance there, 17 and 11. And all these nicknames that we say, for whatever it's worth, they are with love and respect. But
Definitely.
It's too hard to not say some of these guys' names without actually reeling off a few of the nicknames they've earned over this 84-85 series.
And just another tidbit for you, Adam, and for the other listeners as well. I've just recently invested a tidy $8 in a Dave Corzine autographed star basketball card off eBay. Very excited about receiving that in the mail.
That is good. And the postage to Australia will probably be more.
$3 squillion to Australia. So, but no, very excited about that turning up.
Nice pickup.
The following day on Feb 27, the Tribune wrote that the Bulls were in disbelief that they dropped this one to Cleveland after 17 and 16 from David Greenwood, 28 from Jordan, 27 from Woolridge, and Quinton Daly had 20 points. Quinton Daly missed shots at the end of regulation to win the game and 2 shots in overtime and was as distraught as he had been all season after the game, wrote Bob Sakamoto. In a key game to help seal their playoff spot, the Bulls shot 44% and repeatedly let Cleveland back into the game after extending their lead early and in the third term. Sakamoto wrote that the Bulls would spurt, admire their handiwork, and the blue-collar Cavaliers would battle right back. When informed that his teammates were taking this loss harder than usual, Michael Jordan responded, "Good."
Well, that's fair enough too, I suppose. Jordan always the competitor, of course. Other games that took place on the 26th of Feb, Julius Erving had 7 points, not overly newsworthy. However, the fact that he moved into third place all-time on the NBA scoring list, NBA/ABA, with 27,314 points is definitely newsworthy. However, Philadelphia lost 116-97 at Milwaukee.
One of the more underwhelming milestones in the Doc's career, I'm sure, crawling over the line into third place with a 7-point output.
Yeah, only 7 points. However, he did get into that third spot, so he's done well. And same day as well, Utah's Mark Eaton, former podcast guest, inallairness.com/49, set a reunion arena record with 12 blocked shots in his team's 103-96 victory at Dallas. He had 8 rebounds and 6 blocks in the fourth quarter alone. Staggering numbers.
6 block shots in one quarter.
In the fourth quarter. That's ridiculous. So, obviously 7'4", 300 pounds, or the best part of. Great effort there from Mark Eaton.
That's NBA Live 95 numbers.
That's right, exactly. Every player's a superstar. February the 27th, the Bulls travelled to Detroit to the Pontiac Silverdome in Michigan and lost 108-99 in front of 20,114 people. The Bulls dropped to 26-31 on the season. The Pistons had lost 8 of their previous 10 heading into this contest. For Chicago, Jordan had 24 points, 6 boards and 2 assists. Woolridge had 22 points, Quinton Daly 21, and Steve Johnson had a great game, 14 points and 6 rebounds. For Detroit, Bill Laimbeer, 28 points and 14 rebounds. He had some really good scoring games in this 85 season. John Long, 18 points, and Isaiah Lord Thomas III, 12 points and 11 assists.
On the following day, the Tribune wrote that the Bulls broke a franchise record with their 12th straight road loss in Pontiac. Like the Cavs game, the Bulls started out strong, leveled off, then did a slow fade in the critical fourth quarter. The game was tied after 3 at 81 apiece, but the Bulls gave up important offensive rebounds to the likes of Laimbeer and Roundfield and lost the rebounding battle 49-31 to the Pistons in this game.
That's a clobbering on the boards.
It is. On March 1st, the Tribune wrote that the shaky Bulls were about to open a critical 11-game drive for the playoffs. Coach Lockery said that March 18 is the date for Bulls fans to mark on the calendar on whether or not they will be saving up for playoff tickets. The Bulls had 8 games out of 11 at home during that stretch, where their direct rivals for a playoff spot had far fewer home games on their schedule to take advantage of. Lockyer said they need to make up some ground with all the home games coming up, as following this stretch, they had 10 of 14 on the road, where they had just lost 12 straight. It said CBS would be pulling for the Bulls to make the playoffs, as they hadn't scheduled a single Bulls game during the season, thus missing out on the Michael Jordan show.
Yeah, so they obviously made their schedule a little bit around the fact that Elijah was number 1, Bowie number 2. I'm not sure actually how many Portland games ended up being on air during that 85 season, but we did mention in the previous episode, TBS even had to change their schedules around to include just a few Bulls games during the season, so they at least had the foresight to change their schedule during the season to suit a couple of Bulls games on the national televised slate. On the 1st of March, the New York Knicks travelled to Chicago, and the Bulls were winners 109-104 in front of 12,681 fans. The Bulls' record was 27-31 following the game. As you alluded to, Chicago would play 8 of its next 11 games at home. Bernard King entered the game as the NBA's leading scorer, 32.3 points per game. Chicago were led by Orlando Woolridge with 28 points. Michael Jordan scored his second triple-double of the season with 21, 10 rebounds and 10 assists and 3 steals. Dave Corzine had a really good game too, 10 points, 7 rebounds and 2 blocks. And for the Knicks, Bernard King unleashed 41 points. Pat Cummings had 21 and 12 boards, and Darryl the Pedestrian Walker had 14 points and 5 assists. I think I read prior to this game as well, Darryl Walker had 20 of about 21 previous games where he actually scored in double figures, so he was on a bit of a tear as well. It's my turn to keep talking. Oh dear. That's awkward. Quinton Daly had arrived late to the Bulls' last 2 home games, and in the newspapers there was talk of him again being in trouble. Players had to arrive by 6 p.m. on game nights. I think they were even given up to 15 minutes grace to turn up at 15:15. He turned up around 7 p.m. and Fred Carter, the Bulls' assistant coach, was responsible for enforcing the player fines, and a fact that I learnt whilst researching for this episode, players were fined $5 for each minute they arrived late to a game.
Wow.
That was pretty fun to learn. On to you. On to you?
The article attached to this game the following day read, "Thank goodness for the New York Knicks." The Knicks almost matched the Bulls' 26 turnovers in this game, with 23 of their own in the 109-104 Bulls win at Chicago Stadium. Bernard King had 37 points halfway through the last quarter, and after that point, his teammates appeared to forget about the league's leading scorer.
Oh, geez.
As he only scored a further 4 points after that point. That's a lot of points.
Yeah.
Quinton Daly had actually been late to 2 consecutive games now. He said that he was stopped for a traffic ticket before the previous game against the Cavaliers. Quinton Daly was fined by the Bulls on both occasions. Orlando had 27 through 3 quarters before foul trouble limited his effectiveness down the stretch. During this stretch, MJ took over, either scoring, setting up a teammate, or corralling a rebound.
Other games on this day, Atlanta 114-105 had a victory at Boston. That was a big win for the Hawks. Dominique Wilkins had 38 points, including 17 in the fourth quarter, and Larry Bird had 34 points for the Celtics. Mark Aguirre exploded for 46 points, yet his Mavericks still fell 141-140 in overtime. That's an absolute barn burner versus Denver. Nuggets reserve Mike Evans torched Dallas with a career-high 38 points. How about that? In his 9-year career, he had 30-plus points in a game just 2 times, and this was one of them. And I'll be honest, I never knew that Mike Evans played in the NBA until I looked at this fact today.
That makes 2 of us.
Yeah, there you go. But what a great effort. Moving on. On March the 3rd, the New Jersey Nets visited Chicago Stadium, and in front of 9,363 fans, the Bulls dropped a game they probably should have won, 117-113, and their record fell to 27-32.
It was becoming an all too common issue for the Bulls at this point in time. After reading who the Bulls were playing, it's often followed with a Bulls loss or an L. Very, very common at this point in time.
Yeah, and also looking back at already the games we've covered so far to date, mate, honestly, 5, maybe even more games should have been wins for the Bulls, but they just dropped so many close games that they really should have won. Anyhow, I'll get off my soapbox. Quinton Daly, having missed the previous day's practice, was fined $250. That was Quinton Daly's third fine in a week, and that led to a 2-game suspension without pay for, and I quote, repeatedly violating team rules. Daryl Dawkins for the New Jersey Nets was recovering from floating bone chips in his back. He made his first appearance in Chicago for the season, so that was good to see. Chocolate Thunder. Not that I actually saw him, but I'm sure he turned up.
I might like to call those chocolate chips.
That's really good. For Chicago, Jordan had one of the best games of the season, even though it was a loss. He had 37 points and 14 boards, 5 assists and 3 steals. Orlando Woolridge chipped again, there we go. Chip Schaefer, hello. 29 points. And for New Jersey, Otis Birdsong had 30 points and 9 assists, and Michael Sugar Ray Richardson had 28 points and 10 assists.
The suspension of Daly actually drew applause from the Bulls fans at the stadium after the announcement was made, which is quite telling. Rod Thorne said to the Tribune, "I had been his champion, but I'm fed up with it now." This after we mentioned in an earlier episode that Daly felt that it was in Rod Thorne's best interest for him to succeed, as it was Thorne's decision to bring him to Chicago despite some very evident opposition.
2 quick things, mate. I've looked back at Daryl Dawkins' stats for this game. He had 19 points on 8 of 11, so very handy indeed. And the second point is it almost seemed like all these team rules Quinton kept on violating were happening almost daily. Something had to be done.
Too easy. The article spoke again of Daly intentionally missing a game on October 29th after feeling he had been mistreated by the Bulls coaching staff. Adam, you found an amazing excerpt from this article about Coach Lockery's attitude towards Quinton Daly.
Yeah, I found this quite astonishing. The quotes are as follows. First of all, Quinton Daly says, "I'm suspended. Could I sit on the bench?" Kevin said, "No, you're not sitting on my bench. I don't want to see you." Then I said, "Can I sit and watch the game?" Kevin said, "Yeah, you can watch the game, but you have to buy a ticket." I said, "I already have one." He was kind of mad. Stating the obvious, but boy, to say that they had an adversarial relationship obviously is stating the bleeding obvious.
Yeah, at odds, most definitely. Rod Thorne said that the slap on the wrist for the game Daly decided to miss in October was a mistake, something that Daly actually agreed upon, that it was too light of a penalty. Chicago was down by 15 at the half before tying the game twice in the final 2 minutes before eventually losing.
Other games on the same day, Kevin McHale from Boston, in case you didn't know, he played for the Boston Celtics, scored a team record 56 points in the Celtics' 138-129 home win versus the Detroit Pistons. He also added 16 rebounds, 4 assists and 3 blocks, at the same time breaking Larry Bird's 1983 record of 53 points. It was the 6th straight start for McHale, or Kevin McAngel, whoever you want to say, in place of the injured Cedric Maxwell. Larry Bird had a phenomenal game himself, overshadowed by the 56 points of McHale. He had 30 points, 15 rebounds and 10 assists.
Yeah, he broke Larry's scoring record in this game. It's a record that wouldn't last long, though.
That's right, and we will get to that in the not-too-distant future. Obviously, Bird did not take to that too kindly, perhaps a little bit of rivalry within a team, but a good rivalry nonetheless. Also, former podcast guest Eddie Johnson, episode 41, inallairness.com/41. He dropped 40 points and had 10 rebounds in Kansas City Kings' 126-122 overtime win against the LA Clippers in LA.
I don't know what's more amazing, that he had 40 points or 10 rebounds.
Yeah, I know. You don't often see Eddie Johnson having massive rebound games. What was he, 6'7", 6'8"?
Yeah, 6'7" probably.
Yeah, great effort there from Eddie.
Very.
Here's a bit of minutiae, mate, and I think you mentioned this in a previous episode as well. In Detroit, part of the Pontiac Silverdome's roof collapsed under the weight of snow and ice. It meant that some of the Pistons games in the near future would have to take place at Joe Louis Arena. Quite an unusual circumstance.
On March 5th, the Tribune wrote that new owner Jerry Reinsdorf is watching and grading this Bulls team very closely. He spoke about certain things being out of the hands of the current Bulls coach and general manager. He also said it was the current ownership's decision to suspend the quintessential gunner, Quinton Daly, as his majority ownership officially kicks in the following Monday.
Now, on this same day, the 5th, Washington travelled to Chicago and the Bulls were 104-99 winners in front of an incredibly low 5,629 fans. Had to double check, in fact, triple check the crowd numbers.
It's under 1/3 capacity.
Absolutely stunning. So the Bulls increased their records to 28-32. For the Bullets, All-Star Jeff Ruland, dare I say, hashtag shameless self-promotion, episode 45 of In All Earnest. He missed the game with a sprained right shoulder, and it was an injury that caused him to sit out 22 of Washington's previous 23 games heading into this match. For the Bulls, Jordan was nothing short of amazing, 37 points, 9 rebounds, and 8 assists. You almost just get used to the fact that these stat lines are common occurrences during this rookie season. Orlando Woolridge had 18 points and 9 rebounds. Wes Matthews, 10 points and 8 assists. Jawan Oldham, 4 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 blocks. And you've got a little story about that in just a moment. For Washington, Gus Williams had 18 points, Jeff Malone, 16, and Rick Mahorn, 13 points, 13 rebounds, and 7 assists. So a nice game there from Rick.
First of all, the accompanying article to this game in the Tribune includes one of the most spectacular action photos of Michael Jordan I've ever seen, as discovered by yourself, Adam, just this afternoon.
Yeah, mate, it's one of the great photos of all time. It may look grainy, but it adds to the appeal, actually, and it's a fantastic shot from underneath the backboard. And I'll include a photo of that in the show notes to this episode, which can be found at inallairnest.com/NB85-23. So, yeah, a really great photo, one of the best I've ever seen, as you alluded to as well.
Amazing. It wasn't an MJ three-point play which ignited the crowd in this game down the stretch. With 7 minutes remaining, Jawan Oldham blocked 3 consecutive Rick Mahorn shots, and the capacity crowd of 5,629 went nuts. The third block was recovered by Jordan, who went to the other end for a layup to put the Bulls up by 2, 89-87. Oldham's efforts helped the Bulls avoid another dismal loss after letting Washington shoot 65% in the first half and at several points getting their lead on the Bulls out to 20 points. The Bulls' harassing defense rose to the occasion in only allowing the Bullets to shoot 10 for 37 in the second half. One appetizing note from the game is that MJ came out during the third term when a Bullets player stood on his foot and burst an infected corn.
I read that too. That was a bit nasty, wasn't it?
3 minutes later, he returned with the baseline dunk pictured in the article. Extraordinary.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
MJ said that he'd never heard booing like that ever before from the Bulls fans in the first half in letting the Bullets shoot 65%. Coach Lockery said, "I really blistered them at halftime."
Kevin McHale's scoring outbursts continued on this day as well. This time, he scored 42 points in Boston's 110-102 win at New York. Bird quietly notched up his 7th triple-double of the season with 20 points, 19 rebounds, and 10 assists. Bernard King had 38 points for the Knicks. Also, Chuck Nevitt signed a second 10-day contract with the LA Lakers. He played out his first with the team in the first week of November '84. So good to see Chuck Nevitt back in the league.
Podcast favourite Chuck Nevitt.
Oh, and future Chicago Bull, Chuck Nevitt.
Future Bull.
On March the 6th, the Chicago Bulls travelled to the Boston Garden, and one of the more season-defining games that they would play, they had a victory 107-104 over the Celtics in front of 14,890 fans. The Bulls' record, slowly creeping towards 500, was 29-32. Quentin Daly returned to the team. I think he only scored about 4 points after his 2-game suspension. The win snapped the Bulls' abysmal 12-game road losing streak. Danny Ainge had a 60-footer just before the buzzer, which rimmed in and out. And I've actually seen a clip of that on YouTube. An incredible shot, and it really was so close to going in, it's not funny. For the Bulls, Jordan had 33 points, and 15 of those were in the fourth quarter, along with 7 rebounds and 3 assists. Orlando Woolridge, 29 points. David Greenwood had 10 points and 8 boards, and Enos Watley, 12 assists. For Boston, Robert the Chief Parrish, 26 points and 13 rebounds. Bird was 1 rebound away from another triple-double, 25 points, 9 boards, and 10 assists. And Kevin McHale, 22 points and 8 rebounds.
Quite a nice way for the Bulls to break their 12-game road drought with a win over Boston at the Garden. At O'Hare, as the Bulls left for this game in Boston, 2 news crews were on hand to film Quentin Daly. Daly received a lukewarm response from his teammates on his return from suspension, which was followed by this quote from the quintessential gunner: "I don't really care about my teammates. You do a job and go your separate ways. There are only a select few that I care about." One of Quinton's closest friends on the team, David Greenwood, said that he's just going to get himself in deeper and deeper after hearing that Quinton had said that.
Yeah, not the greatest comments you want to hear from a fellow teammate.
No.
Not a whole lot of harmony within the locker room there, you'd think. On the same day, Jeff Malone of the Washington Bullets scored a season-high 40 points in the Washington 127-121 double overtime win against the Portland Trailblazers. Future Chicago Bull, Steve Coulter, who will be part of the team in 1987, had a career-high 35 points.
Look forward to hearing more about Steve Coulter in NB87, Adam.
Oh, dear. Now, moving on, mate. March the 7th, Phoenix's Walter Davis connected on a three-point shot at the buzzer, and the Suns defeated the San Antonio Spurs 119-117. That would have been a good one to see.
Also on this day, the Tribune wrote that Coach Kevin McHale had made one major change after the Bulls' recent spiral. He said that he decided to move to a trapping, double-teaming defense, which even the world champion Boston Celtics weren't immune to in the previous win at Boston Garden.
March the 8th, the LA Clippers visited Chicago and were spanked 117-101 in front of 7,626 fans. The Bulls improved to 30-32 on the season. The Clippers were led by new head coach Don Chaney, who was 0-1 prior to this contest, after replacing Jim Lynam, who was 22-39 when he was sacked. The Bulls, meanwhile, with this victory, had won 4 of their last 5 games, so their form had certainly swung into the more positive side of things as far as the team was concerned, if I learn to speak. For the Chicago Bulls, Orlando Woolridge, 28 points and 9 rebounds, and a then career high of 5 blocks. Jordan had 26 points, 8 rebounds and 7 assists, and Jawan Oldham, the star of this episode, had 9 rebounds and 4 blocks. For the Clippers, Derek Smith had 23 points, Norm Nixon 16 points, and Michael Cage 7 points and 8 rebounds.
A pre-game chat with Orlando by Coach Kevin McHale to have his, and I quote, role redefined, paid dividends with Orlando's 28, 9 and 5 blocks. Lockery said he informed Woolridge that he had gotten a little, and I quote, lax with his rebounding and defensive effort. Orlando was such an amazing athlete. Imagine if he had to put in this kind of effort defensively over his entire career. I know that he's not alone. He's not David Robinson Caruso in NBA players who only play one end of the floor, but he's another one of those guys like a Dominique that was such an electric athlete that if he had really applied himself, he could have been a sensational defensive player as well.
Firstly, speaking of Caruso, was this game played on a Friday? Anyhow, yeah, you make a really good point there because he just got a bit of a G up there from Kevin Lockery, and all of a sudden he comes out and has one of the best games of his season across the board. So, yeah, good point there, mate.
The Bulls' one-man SWAT team, Jawan Oldham, had another 4 rejections in this game. The Bulls overcame a slow 13-2 start to overcome the hapless Clippers, who had lost 8 in a row to this point. After the 13-2 start, the Bulls went from strength to strength in tying the game at 30 after 1, had a 58-51 lead at the half, and got out to a 76-55 lead after 3. Clippers coach Don Chaney made mention of how much the Bulls' new trapping D had hurt them during the game.
On the 9th of March, Utah travelled to Chicago and defeated the Bulls 111-105 at Chicago Stadium in front of 12,288 fans. The Bulls dropped to 30-33 on the season. With the win, the Jazz had won 8 of their past 10 road games, so they were obviously a team in form. Chicago led by as many as 17 points in the first half before capitulating for the loss. This was one of just 5 games for the season that a rookie John Stockton would start for Utah. For the Bulls, Orlando Woolridge had another monster game, 35 points and 16 rebounds, and Jordan had 28 points. For Utah, Darryl Dr. Duncanstein Griffith had 40 points. John Stockton had a really good game, 14 points and 12 assists. Prior to the game, the Bulls had their first annual reunion game. 4 of the 5 Bulls starters from the 75 team were involved, including Tom Bowinkle, Bob Love, Jerry Sloan and Norm Van Leer. There were 2 10-minute halves, and Johnny Red Kerr was one of the coaches, and I believe Bob Love was the other coach. Just a little bit of side information there for you, mate. Actually, they probably should have got some of those 75 starters to actually play for the Bulls in this game. And moving on as well, same day, Dominic Wilkins of Atlanta dropped a then career-high 48 points on the Detroit Pistons in a 115-113 home loss. Kelly Tripucka had 16 points in the last quarter, including 2 free throws with just 5 seconds remaining to seal the win. Isaiah Thomas had 23 points and 16 assists. And Golden State Warriors' Purvis Short had 44 points. New York's Bernard King had 42, and Utah's Darrell Griffith 40. They were each members who joined the 40-plus club on that same day.
The players of the week for this 15-day block. The week of February 24, Mark Aguirre of Dallas averaged 28.8 points, including a 45-point outing versus Washington on February 22nd. The player of the month for February was the Magic Man, who averaged 19.3 points and 13.9 assists, and the Lakers went 11-2 during that 13-game span. The week of March the 3rd, Eric Sleepy Floyd averaged 25 points per game, including 28 points and 15 assists in a game versus Portland on February the 28th.
Quickly go through the player highs for this period of time, mate. Kevin McHale of Boston had 56 points versus Detroit on the 3rd of March. Akeem Olajuwon had 25 boards at Denver on the 5th of March in his team's double overtime loss. And Enos Watley had 21 assists, as we mentioned, against the Golden State Warriors on the 23rd of February. Now, the NBA standings through March the 9th, the division leaders were as follows. In the Atlantic, the Celtics were the first team to 50 wins. They were 50-14. The Bucks were the leaders in the Central Division, 43-19. In the Midwest, the Nuggets were 42-22. And in the Pacific Division, the Lakers were 45-18. Through the 9th of March, the Bulls were 30-33. They went 5-4 in this 15-day span. And the Golden State Warriors were the league's lowest ranked team at 17-46. All right, mate, we've made it through another episode. Thanks again for being a part of the show. Anything you'd like to add before we end the episode, mate?
Giddy up.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show, and share my web address with your friends and colleagues, inallairness.com. Check out the podcast archive for plenty more episodes with high-profile guests. Follow me on Twitter at inallairness. Please add your like to the show's social hub, facebook.com/inallairness. Join me next time for another edition of the show.